But at any rate, here we are, and it's exciting. Shamsi, Beth Ann, and I were talking about sort of what sort of topics to discuss today, and we were thinking a little bit about self-care, first of all, which is, you know, it's one of those topics that sounds kind of shallow, taking care of yourself. It seems obvious. Either it's obvious what self-care is, or we think self-care is all about like going to the spa or something, and it's not. So we'll talk a little bit about that because we're in a unique situation here. We are sheltered in place in our various places, and we need to be aware of what the stresses are on us and on our families and how we're going to deal with those. And especially as we go into Holy Week and Pascha and we think about how we make plans for Holy Week and Pascha, right? It's going to be different this year. And nobody really knows what it's going to be like, in part because we haven't done it before, in part because, frankly, it changes all the time. And I feel like I'm working on a project with some friends, and we were writing about Holy Week, and one of my friends goes, wait, the ecumenical patriarch just said no one can live stream from their churches. And we're like, whoa, we can't, just in Constantinople. Okay, we're okay here. But it's like, it's that kind of situation where you really don't know what is going to be happening in the future. We really can't plan, which in a way, I think it's kind of beautiful, because I think the truth is we shouldn't be planning. We shouldn't be so confident all the time that we can set everything up the way that we want it. And so maybe it's good for us to live in a situation that is constantly shifting for a while, to remind us of that and to teach us a little bit about not making those plans. So as we look at Holy Week, we need to sort of make a plan to some extent, recognizing that we don't know for sure what'll happen and that we just have to be open to it. And so I think as we go through all of this, it requires a lot of flexibility, and it requires us as Christians to remain focused on God. And it's very funny because I think when we first got sort of put in our houses, a lot of us were going, hey, it's the beginning of Lent, and now we're locked in our houses. That's so great because it's going to be so quiet and prayerful. And it turns out it's not that quiet, and it's not automatically that prayerful. It's really still an effort that we have to make. It's always an effort that we have to make. Even for an ascetic in a cave out in Palestine, he's making an effort to focus on God and not to think about something else. So not that we cannot think of other things, but we do want to make an effort to spend a lot of this time fruitfully. So let's start with the beginning. I want to start with this idea of self-care. As I said, sometimes we think that self-care sounds like just going to the spa or something. And I think that that is because here in the United States, when an idea is agreed upon as being a good idea, one of the first things that we try to do is make money on it. So as soon as people start talking about, self-care, people should take care of themselves, we always have a bunch of people leap up to make some money on it. So then they're selling you bath salts, and they're trying to sell you a visit at the spa, and they want to sell you a special candle for your bathroom, and all of these things. I've even seen, it's really funny, if you Google self-care products, it's stuff like, here's a jar and 14 stickers that say things like breathe, relax, and you just put the stickers on the jar, and that'll, I guess, help you take care of yourself. And it's all very silly. But the truth is that self-care is really not a silly thing. It's not about spending money. It's not about buying the right bath oils or anything like that. What we're talking about is, how do we take care of ourselves? And I heard the most wonderful sermon from a priest named Father Dan Suciu. He is a Romanian priest in the Greek church here in San Antonio, Texas. He's retired now because he is in excruciating pain due to some terrible back injuries that he has. But he comes and speaks just every once in a while, and the things that he says are so beautiful. Honestly, I think because he is living in pain, and he's just so prayerful, and he's struggling. And as we all know, God comes to us in our struggles. So Father Dan, one day, is talking about Jairus's son, right? So is it Jairus's daughter or Jairus's son? It's his daughter, isn't it? Yeah, it's his daughter, sorry. Jairus is important. He's an important guy in the synagogues. His daughter is sick, and he comes to Christ and says, will you come and heal my daughter? I know that you can heal my daughter, right? So he He humbles himself. He comes to Christ, even at the expense of perhaps, costing him in his position in the community. And he begs Christ to help. And he trusts Christ, that Christ will help. So Father Dan's talking about this, and he says, whenever you see someone coming to Christ to heal their child, their baby, always think of your own soul, that your soul is like your baby, and you're supposed to be taking care of it. So when you are, say, sort of falling out of the habit of praying, and you're not really in that mindset of being focused on God, when we come back to confession, when we come back to communion, when we come back just to prayer, we bring our soul back and we start feeding it again, because it's getting sick and it's kind of shriveling up when it's away from God. And we come back to take care of it. So taking care of ourselves means taking care of our souls, and it means taking care of our bodies. So it's not some kind of shallow, ridiculous thing. I just want to get that out there from the start. In order to take care of ourselves, we really need to recognize, first of all, how Jairus took care of his daughter, right? Jairus was humble, and he bowed down, and he trusted Christ to know how to take care of her. And so that's where we begin, is that we have to begin with some humility and trust that God knows how to take care of our souls and to follow that, right? And so our culture, I would say, generally gives us the kind of schedule or the kind of rhythm in our homes that is a little chaotic. You read a lot about families not ever having time to cook dinner together, people not being able to sit down with one another, maybe can't go to church on Sundays because we've got sports practices. We've got all these things going on that determine our routine, and it's not us being intentional. Now, all of a sudden, we have this very unique opportunity where a lot of those outside concerns, a lot of those other things that have been holding us back, or that we say have been holding us back, all of a sudden are kind of out of the way, right? So now we're in charge of our own routine. We're in charge of how we're going to handle it. So the church offers us a very different rhythm than our culture offers us, right? Our culture, it's like, run this way, run that way, don't forget to do this, don't forget to do that. The church is much more saying to you, when you wake up in the morning, say a prayer. When you eat your meals, bless the food. When you go to bed at night, say a prayer. That's 5 prayers a day. That's a rhythm during your day when you're praying throughout the day, right? And so we have these rhythms, we have our weekly rhythms, and we have our annual seasonal rhythms. And that's where it's so funny. Here we are, and it's Great Lent. And we mean to be following all of our Lenten rhythms, and of course at home alone, we can still fast, we can still pray, but we can't go in for the church services. We can't have those same experiences. So now, on the one hand, nothing else is getting in the way, but on the other hand, we are really in charge of making sure that we're doing it and creating an environment for it. So the church creates an environment for us, right? When you walk into the church building, you smell the incense, you kind of hear the quiet, the darkness. You pick up your candle, you light your candle, you cross yourself, right? This is very physical. It involves all of the senses. You'll start to hear the psalms, or you'll hear the chanters, you'll hear the priest. So we're going to have hearing, seeing, smelling, feeling, all of these things happen around us to create an environment that calls us to prayer. It's interesting. If you look at, there are scientific studies about memory and scent, and they have all these wonderful things where they prove that if you associate a certain smell with a certain thing, whenever you smell that smell, you're going to remember that thing. But we already knew that, because we all know that if you smell a specific food, you'll remember your grandmother's kitchen, or you'll remember your classroom from elementary school, whatever it is. When we walk into the church, we have the incense, and that calls us to prayer, right? Just like the candles call us to prayer, the chanters call us to prayer, the services. So at home, we need to be thinking about that. We need to, instead of relying on our parish to create that for us, we have to be the ones who create it. We have to get the candles and light the candles. And we need to put on maybe chanting to hear it, or pull out the book and be reading ourselves the prayers. We need to cross ourselves. We need to stand up when we're doing these things. So one of the beautiful things that we're all able to do these days, well, some of us are doing reader services, some of us are doing live streamed services. Regardless of which you're doing, be very intentional about your space, right? Most of us have icon corners. If we don't, we can grab whatever icons we have and put them together, and voila, you have an icon corner. All it takes is one or two icons, and there it is. If we can also get a candle, maybe you don't have beeswax candles like we have in church. Maybe it's a different kind of candle. It kind of doesn't matter. Next time you get your food, get some emergency candles in the grocery store. Get those big glass candles, whatever it is. Have the candles. If you have incense, burn incense. If you don't, we can still buy it. Actually, a lot of our beautiful Orthodox stores are still going. Legacy Icons, the Ancient Faith store, who else? OrthodoxGifts.com, all of these different stores, they're still selling little starter kits for incense and all these things. Let's be intentional about trying to create an environment where it's quiet, where we can see icons, and where we start getting all those triggers that pull us into prayerfulness. And as we stand and as we cross ourselves, as we pull out the prayer books or we look at our priests online, we'll begin to feel it and we'll begin to be inside of it. That is a huge part of self-care. And it's interesting because that's not when I go around and speak about self-care, I don't usually say this, but now it's really a necessary part of self-care because we don't want our souls to get sick. We don't want them to be ill. We take care of them like we take care of our babies. So we'll feed our souls in that way. The thing too about self-care, especially when we get to physical self-care, which would be things like sleep, eat healthy foods, right? Like literally take care of yourself, make sure that you're healthy. This is something I think, especially women, if we have a family that we're taking care of, or if we have maybe a spouse who's sick, something like that, we're so focused sometimes on thinking that the right thing to do is to be selfless and to put ourselves completely aside and only help them. It is important to be selfless, but we also have to recognize that we're instruments of God, and those instruments have to be taken care of, right? Our example in this, if you ever worry about this or you're not sure this is what you should do, our example is Christ himself. He would go into towns, and if you picture the condition of medical care at the time, almost every medical ailment that you could have was going uncured, right? So he would walk into a town and people would just pack him. They would pack around him and they would press him, and everyone needed something from him, which I think is sometimes how mothers feel, frankly, sometimes how wives feel, sometimes in our lives, also daughters, right? Like women, I know men also feel this way as well because they're carrying on their back the responsibility perhaps of taking care of the family financially. Regardless of what it is, whether you're dealing with financial support or emotional support or physical support, and odds are most of us adults are doing all of those things for someone, we need to rest too. Or we're pressed like Christ is. We need to rest like he did. So what did Christ do? Luke tells us in chapter 5 that he would often slip away to the wilderness and pray. Christ took breaks. He rested. And of course, when he created the world, right, he rested. God probably doesn't need to rest. Odds are the only reason he was doing that was to show you that you need to rest. So we need to remind ourselves that taking this time out is just about keeping ourselves together so that we can really take care of others. And I think this is really important to think about as we come close to Holy Week, because Holy Week is a challenge. It's hard, right? Now, this time we're not going to be driving back and forth to church, so we have that going for us, perhaps. But now it's our responsibility to make it feel holy, so there's that. We might be, in the past, perhaps on Palm Sunday, when you went to church, your father handed you a blessed palm. And now you're going to be in charge of figuring out how to find some palms. And some of you are, I guess up in Pennsylvania, I don't know about you, here in Texas, we don't have palm trees. I think for Southern Californians and Floridians, this is a no-brainer. But for the rest of us, it's really, you can go outside and get some grass, right? Do you have a long grass plant growing somewhere in your neighborhood? Clip a couple of pieces of grass. You can fold those. If not, you could really just use paper, right? You could use, doesn't even have to be green paper. It could be purple paper. It doesn't matter, right? The important thing is that we're going to do those things that call us back to the feast that we're celebrating. Small things. Make a little palm cross, especially, do you have a collection of palm crosses over the years? We come home, a lot of us take our palm cross and we put it behind an icon in the icon corner, or we hold on to it, maybe we tuck it into our Bible or something. Do that again. Have a crazy palm cross for this year to remember this year when we did everything differently and when we didn't have access to all of the same things and when we did it ourselves. So this Holy Week then might mean that there's a lot more preparation. Sometimes we all work together, right? Like the red eggs. In many parishes, a group of women gets together and they make all the red eggs. And now every single person has to make their own red eggs. And every single one of us is going to have to figure it out. Are you going to make a tomb? You could make a tomb in your house. It could be small. It could be like a shoebox where you cut out the sides. It could be big. It could be grand, especially if you have some older kids around who don't have a lot to do. Why not give them the assignment? Say, I don't care how you do it. Make me a tomb, surprise me, and see what they come up with, right? We can do all sorts of beautiful things to make this come to life. And so in order to be able to put in that kind of effort, though, and to still have the peace inside of us, the energy inside of us, the patience to be able to come quietly and pray. Because here's the thing, a lot of us online, I've written some articles like, hey, here are some great things we could do during Holy Week. Last week, a lot of us were writing these articles. And then this week we started talking to each other and going, I feel tired just from writing those articles. I'm going to be worn out from doing all those things. Where's Holy Week in that, right? When you picture Holy Week and the beauty of Holy Week, one of the first things I think when we're staying home, one of the first things we think about is the things that we're going to miss. We think about how we won't be standing in the parish we won't come together and decorate the tomb, right? We won't come together for processions. We won't light each other's candles on Pascha. And that's painful. But this also means that we have a different kind of Pascha. We have a different kind of Holy Week. So we need to think about what really matters to us about Holy Week and Pascha. And I think the first thing that we need to do is be very intentional about the mindset that we're going to have going into this. How are we going to think about things? And how are we going to think about Holy Week and Pascha and then share that with the rest of the household? How are they going to think about Holy Week and Pascha? How can we support each other in trying to make this feel like Holy Week, right? Because it is Holy Week, whether you're at church or not, but it doesn't always feel like Holy Week if you're not really observing it. And I think we've all had days like that in past Holy Weeks where, maybe on Holy Tuesday, there was something you couldn't get out of, and it just didn't feel like Holy Tuesday, right? But you come back to it Holy Wednesday. We have to think in advance about how we're going to adjust whatever responsibilities we have. Are we working from home? Are our kids doing school from home? What can be put on hold? What can be done in advance so that we'll have some time? And also think about how are we going to treat the other people in our households? This is a great conversation to have with young people in particular, to say in advance, if we want this place to feel holy, if we want to have some peace for Holy Week, then we need to think about whether we're going to be bickering about things or if we're going to be peaceful and kind, right? We'll make plans like that. We'll also, of course, try to get our grocery shopping done and be flexible, right? Like it would be great to have red eggs on Pascha. Sometimes it's just great to have eggs. Sometimes lately I've gone to the grocery store and there have not been eggs, right? So we're going to do the best we can. And we're going to have a mindset of flexibility and of gratitude. Whatever we get, we're going to be grateful for, and whatever we don't get, we're not going to worry about. And one of the things I want us to think about, I think that is helpful and that has been helpful for me as I'm sort of trying to envision, how much can we do and what just can't be replicated, right? I mean, the truth is we can make a little tomb, and my kids are going to love that, and they'll make flowers and they'll put them on this tomb, and they'll process with it, and they'll feel good about having had a procession, and that'll be very nice. But that's not the same thing. It's not the same thing, and that's okay. It's something different. And one of the things that I would encourage any of you to do, if at some point, we're going to go up and down over this, but if at some point you're just feeling depressed about not having Pascha in the church, one of the things that I think is so helpful is to think about those saints, those wonderful, beautiful priests that we've had who were in the gulags over the years, people who were in concentration camps. You can search, there's actually, I could put the link in the chat right now. There's an article called Pascha in, how do you say it, Dachau, the concentration camp in Germany. They were liberated by the Americans during Holy Week, Orthodox Holy Week, right? So I think the Americans and the Catholics and everybody, they're not thinking about it as Holy Week because they had already finished Easter, but for the Orthodox, it was Holy Week. And the Orthodox people in the prison are very grateful to be liberated. They're just grateful to be alive, to know that they've survived this. But in the back of their minds, they are thinking, ooh, it's Holy Week. I wonder if there's a way to have Pascha. Like, what will Pascha be like? Could we have a Pascha? Well, it turns out that some of them were able to put something together. And there was a room with just a simple table in it that the Catholic people had been using for meetings. And so they allowed the Orthodox people to get together in there. And they had one icon. And it happened to be an icon of the Theotokos from before the schism. So it was an Orthodox and Catholic icon. And it was just sitting there on the table, and they walked in. And you can imagine their gratitude to see an icon in a concentration camp after years, right? And at a point where all of that is over and they're sort of able to rest a little bit and to be grateful for having made it. So they come in, they have this icon, they have bed sheets. So they're taking their bed sheets and they're tearing them, and they're drawing in like red pencil crosses on them and making vestments. They're putting it over the table. They're putting it over the priests. They had priests there from Mount Athos. They had priests from Russia. They had all sorts of different priests. I want to say the Russians had left by then, so it might have been Mount Athos and Serbs, but several priests. When Pascha came and they were doing the services, between all of those priests, they knew the whole thing by heart. They could do everything by heart, because as they started going, one of them would remember this and the next one would pick it up. The liturgy is in our heart, and Pascha is in our heart. And so if we have done a good job of attending to the services over the years, if we have loved Holy Week and we have loved Pascha, we have enough of it in our hearts. And of course, we're lucky. We can live stream, we have books, we can order more books, we can go online, and a lot of parishes and dioceses have actually put up the exact service that your parish uses online so that you can follow along or so that you can do it on your own. So we have access to a lot of these things. They came together and they had, like the tin cups and the bowls that they had used to eat in concentration camps, and they used those for their chalices. They say that it was the most beautiful Pascha they ever experienced, because they were all there together, and that God's grace was with them because of the effort they made and because of the suffering they went through. So to whatever extent we make an effort, and to whatever extent we're suffering, frankly, like to whatever extent we really are missing the services, the more this pains you, perhaps the more God visits you this year on Pascha, right? The more he sends us. He's going to send us what we need, because God always provides. So I would say, let's think about the effort that we make. On the one hand, so let's talk about like logistical efforts we can make, physical things that we could do. Okay, we talked about making palms, right? On Palm Sunday, you can fold palm crosses. If you have a parish tradition with the kids on Lazarus Saturday, a lot of us do. Some people have a confession retreat. Some people, we do kind of a Lazarus retreat where we do a skit about Lazarus. We're going to try to do that over video and send it out. But, you can do a skit with your kids at home. You can read the story at home. Think about what you love about each of these days and try to do something small to bring it back, especially if you have children in the home. So we have Lazarus, then we have Palm Sunday. For the bridegroom services, if you have I should say for palms, a lot of us, even though we fold palms every year, forget year to year how to do it. YouTube, if you search Orthodox palm cross on YouTube, you will find so many videos of how to fold a palm cross. And there are even Coptic videos if you want a challenge. They do these amazing kind of basket weave crosses and designs, and those are all available to you there. And so, we have these resources. Let's use them. For the bridegroom services, with kids, at the very, maybe when we're talking about how Christ cursed the fig tree, maybe we'll pull out some figs or fig Newton or something, right? Maybe when we're talking about the virgins and the lamps, maybe we have an oil lamp, or we can create one, right? A little jar with oil with a floating wick on top. Voila, you have an oil lamp, right? We can do those things to bring something tactile, especially for younger kids. But of course, the main thing is that when we're reading the services and the readings for the day, we're lighting candles. We're doing those things that make our home feel like the church that we know, so that our brains recognize it as Holy Week coming underway. On Holy Wednesday, many of us do Holy Unction at our parishes. I don't know, do you guys do Holy Unction on Holy Wednesday? We can anoint each other with oil, right? That's not Holy Unction. It's not chrism. It's not a sacrament. But that's a beautiful thing. A lot of people actually do that like on Sunday nights, or they'll do that when their kids are going on a trip. They'll, make the sign of the cross and bless them. We can bless each other with oil or with holy water. We can do those things that help us to remember and to feel like we're there. Also, just sitting down and making a prayer list on Holy Wednesday, thinking really intentional. Who do I know that I'm praying for? And you may have a list of people, especially if you're on social media, you see when people post different priests around the country have coronavirus, there are several Orthodox priests. There was an Orthodox bishop who passed away, a Serbian bishop. There have been many Serbian priests who've died or are currently in the hospital. We can make these lists, and also of the people we know, right? And people who are sick anyway, because all of our other illnesses did not stop just because this crazy virus came around. So let's make lists of people we can pray for so that we can really feel that sacrament and those prayers for healing. On Holy Thursday, of course, we celebrate the mystical supper. I have a daughter who has never baked before. She never showed any interest in it. And all of a sudden she was baking prosphora on Saturday nights because she just misses it. Like, she just wants the taste of prosphora on a Sunday. So I'm sure she'll be making it for Holy Thursday as well, right? But we could do that. If you don't have a seal, you can just make the bread, right? Just for the taste of it, just to remember it. Again, to bring your senses back to church. We could wash each other's feet. We can hear the service of the 12 Gospels. What if you found 12 candles and you lit a candle for each of the Gospels and put it, either next to your live stream or on your icon corner as you read? That's very beautiful. And it's very touching, right? You put a cross with Christ on the cross in front of it and be able to stand there. And it's very much like in church. And I can't say for sure because I haven't done Holy Week at home. None of us have. But I think these things can help us at least trigger those senses inside of us to come back. On Holy Friday, we talked about making a tomb, right? You could go very far with this, right? You could have an icon of Christ that you put on a cross and then you put in the tomb. You could wrap it in white linens. You can do as much or as little of this as it makes sense in your family, right? If you're good with just putting up a cross, do that. Put up a cross and a candle, and it's very beautiful. If you have little kids and you want them to feel it, sometimes just standing in the icon corner and praying, we worry will not make a big enough impact on them. And so we can go all out for them if we want. We can do the procession on Holy Friday evening with the Lamentations. On Holy Saturday, why not get some leaves and throw them in the air, right? Those leaves signify life. They don't have to be bay leaves. A lot of us have bay leaves in our spice cabinet, though, so we could get some, right? I actually have some from last year still that I can use. But you could go out in your yard and just get whatever kinds of leaves you can find. It doesn't matter. Your kids can make leaves out of green paper. It doesn't matter. The point is that we are going to celebrate, and we're going to have that beautiful, the great thing about the throwing the bay leaves is that Christ is harrowing Hades, right? So Christ has gone into Hades, and there he is destroying Hades. He's tearing it apart. He's breaking down the gates. So there's an earthquake. There, the sun goes dark. All these things are going to, the sun goes dark at the crucifixion. There's an earthquake on Saturday. All of this upheaval is showing that sort of, symbolically kind of down below us, there is upheaval. Death is being overthrown. So have that upheaval somehow in your home, right? And sing the hymns out loud. Teach your kids in advance. Some of us are not great singers like me, and I don't always know the tune of the hymns, right? Like I'll recognize the words, but I can't just do it out of nowhere. If I'm live streaming, I have my chanters to help. But the other thing you can do is if you go on YouTube, there are so many, shockingly many, thousands of videos that Orthodox people who love chanting have put online. We've got all the chants in all the languages by different choirs, and you can see the choir, or you can see beautiful icons. There's any way you want to do it. You can find these chants and you could learn them in advance if you wanted, yourself or with your kids. Maybe, for example, on Holy Saturday, if you were to play that at night as you're going to sleep, if you were to play some of the hymns of Holy Saturday, they'll already be in your head when you wake up on Saturday morning, right? That those little efforts, I think, will make a big difference. And of course, on Holy Saturday, you got to make your red eggs if you can, if you have eggs. If you can, whatever you can make of your usual Pascha foods, right? Like when you go get your weekly supplies, I think we're all trying to go once every 1 or 2 weeks to the store, as little as possible. Buy some lamb if you can, right? Here in Texas, it never sells out because no one here eats lamb. So it's always easy to find. But if you can't, get the foods that you love. Make the breads, make the cookies, even if you're home alone. Make them, you can put them in little baskets and maybe, give them to your neighbor like you gave her the soup, right? We were just talking about giving sick neighbors soup. Whatever you can do, obviously, wear gloves or hold it with a towel or something, because we don't want to be passing on a virus as part of this blessing. That would be terrible. But there are ways we can share. There are ways we can invite other people into the celebration. So the efforts that we're making in that way are physical efforts, right? And they're very beautiful. And there's no reason that we should not be making them this year. But we also have to balance that with taking care of ourselves, with knowing that we're getting enough sleep, that we are getting enough food, enough rest, all of these things. But there's something else about self-care that I think is really important, and it's a very Orthodox idea, and it's one that we don't immediately think about. And it is actually, there is a very beautiful, it's one of the 55 maxims, and I have it written down and I'm going to miss it. I don't know where it is. All right. Father Thomas Hopko talks about this, so it is legitimately Orthodox. Also, St. Porphyrios said at one point, you don't become holy hunting down evil. Forget about evil. Look towards Christ and he will save you. Instead of standing outside the door to drive away the enemy, ignore him. Is evil coming this way? Gently let yourself go the other way. Meaning, if evil is coming to attack you, give your internal strength to the good, to Christ. Plead, Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on me. He knows how to have mercy on you. In what way? And when you are filled with good, you won't turn to evil anymore. You will become good by yourself, with God's grace. How can evil find any ground anymore? It disappears. So St. Porphyrios and Father Thomas Hopko and a lot of our Orthodox saints and writers and priests will talk about how it is not so much helpful to fight evil, to fight bad thoughts by fighting against them in a negative way, by trying to battle. Instead, what we really do is we try to turn away from evil. And this becomes really important with self-care, because I think a lot of times, whether we realize it or not, we have this constant monologue happening in our heads, right? Our own thoughts are always going on. And of course, sometimes they're not our thoughts. Sometimes they're logos me, they're just things that pop into our heads. Sometimes they are our own thoughts. Sometimes it's something from our childhood. Like, some of us, if you have a mother who was always kind of on you to do better, you might now have her voice in your head on you to do better. Or maybe some of us are perfectionists by nature, and it's actually our own personal critical voice that is still chasing us around. And we really need to think about this, because sometimes we think that this is a good way to make sure we get our stuff done, right? To keep me on the straight and narrow. I'm not going to let myself off the hook. I'm going to kind of nag at myself. But it's actually the same thing as it is with other people. You generally get better results not by nagging someone, but by inviting them, by showing them love, by showing them a good example. We need to treat ourselves like that. We need to be kind to ourselves. So if we see something negative coming at us, we don't turn and focus on the negative. We turn and we focus on Christ. We focus on the positive. So that goes for this critical inner voice that we sometimes get. And I think this can be one of the most important things about self-care, honestly, is thinking about how we're thinking. Are we thinking negatively? Is it possible to turn that around and think more positively? There's a beautiful book called Time and Despondency for anyone who really struggles with these kind of things. Dr. Nicole Rokas wrote it. It's from Ancient Faith Publishing. One of her chapters I really love. She talks about dart prayers. And it's from Evagrius. It's old. And it's like you get a line from the Psalms that directly responds to a particular thing that you are nagging yourself about, or that you worry about, that you are depressed about, those kind of repetitive issues that pop up in our heads. She has this list of like lines from the Psalms that answer those. And you just have the one line and you just answer it with that. But you bring yourself back to the beautiful. You bring yourself back to Christ. So I want to sum up. I sort of have two themes going here today. We have this idea of taking care of ourselves, and this other idea of, Holy Week and Pascha, and this quarantine, and what kind of special problems come up in terms of taking care of ourselves. And so, I think there's a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of fear. There can be a lot of negativity, especially if we're watching a lot of the news right now. I think we are surrounded by negativity in plenty of ways. So it's really important to think about how we're going to take care of ourselves long term, especially in this circumstance, and especially during Holy Week and Pascha, because we don't want to miss Holy Week and Pascha because we were too busy worrying about the future, or maybe mourning the past and previous Holy Weeks. We really want to focus and be present and find out what God has to offer us. He's had a lot to offer a lot of people at Pascha. He's offered us a lot of things at past Paschas, and it wasn't because we were in church. It was because we made the effort. It was because we fasted and we prayed and we showed up even when it was hard. And so we need to find a way to do that in the coming, in next week and on Pascha. And after that, I also just want to say briefly that we're focused very much on how we're going to do Holy Week and Pascha. But the odds are we're still going to be in our houses after Holy Week and Pascha. And we need to be taking care of ourselves so that we don't crash after that too. Because after Pascha, I mean, in my head, I kind of feel like we're going to go back to normal, and we're not. Certainly here in Texas, I think we have at least probably 6 weeks or more left. Different areas will be different. Some of you maybe started earlier than we did. Maybe you'll be out sooner. But for the most part, we have a long haul, and we need to take care of ourselves. So that's going to mean taking care of our souls, in the sense that our soul is our baby, and that we need to be taking our soul to Christ. We need to be prayerful. We need to do everything we can to hold on to the peace that God sends us, and especially in Holy Week, but that goes on forever. Honestly, just those simple things: sleep, eat, don't watch the news all the time. Like, those are 3 rules of thumb. I have a friend who said, when you work from home, the number one thing is always take a shower every day. Like, get dressed at some point. It doesn't have to be in clothes. It could just be in fresh pajamas or something. But, we need to do these things to take care of ourselves, because it's not going to be just another couple of days. It's going to be a little while. So, with that, I want to open up to questions and find out, what are you guys worried about? What are you seeing coming that you're concerned is going to be a challenge? And, also to hear your solutions are and what your plans are.
Okay, so I think we're going to try this. I think the easiest way to do this might be if you're able to type your question in the chat. If not, you can raise your hand, wave at me, give me a thumbs up, and I'll try to unmute you here so we kind of keep maybe just one or two. I have dogs that I'm very glad I can mute. So I'm going to talk just for a minute about some takeaway for me, while maybe you want to type your messages or think. The one thing that's that I like about this is it's work. It's what we bring to it, and you have to plan for this, and we have to plan going forward. The thought occurred to me when you were speaking, Elissa, that okay, we're making this plan, and I've already actually started talking with my boys, and I was just all glory to God. They were engaging it. But to maybe broaden the scope of the discussions we're having to the future. How's this going to look for us in the future after we have the joy of Pascha? How are we going to continue to turn away from some of those negative thoughts and bring our focus back to Christ in our homes going forward? That was just a really powerful 1-2 punch for me, is what your focus is on is what you're feeding. And so you said, we actually, like, you even turned your head, that very visual, we're turning away from those things that are distracting us right now, the TV, the numbers, the news, maybe even the Facebook, because we're checking to see, what the latest counts are there. And we're actually, but then the second part of that is, you said what you have to turn to Christ and our focus on him, on God. And so it's not just a turning away, but it's what we're turning to. I'm thoughtful that we carry a lot of that going forward. This isn't just for Holy Week and Pascha. This is the long term for our lives.
Well, and it's always true with every Lent, right? Like during Great Lent, we pray more, we fast, we go to the services, we're focused. You have Pascha and it's great. And then it's really joyful, but it's also really exhausting. And then, I know for me, shortly thereafter, I start to realize how lazy I've gotten and how much I miss Lent. And I miss that I was prayerful. Not like enough to go back to it, apparently. We don't get back to that really Lenten dedication, although, we'll go super lazy and then we'll come back to kind of a normal. But that's always an issue. And I think that it's maybe even, strangely enough, going to be a little bit more of an issue this year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I do not see any questions coming up. We'll give a couple more minutes for that. I am looking for those of you that have who has a question?
Mary
Compass. Okay, give me a minute, Mary. I'm getting there. Okay, go ahead, Mary.
Another cheery idea for Palm Sunday and Pascha is to do a Zoom with the family.
Oh, that's nice.
Like, my son lives in Paris. He's all isolated there. It's horrible. So I think that would pick up people's spirits. It's a lot of fun. Have a little glass of wine, laugh, toast to Christ.
That's right. Absolutely. Especially on Pascha. My priest was talking about doing a Zoom call, possibly in the middle of the night. Like after he said Christ is risen, while the service is going on, having a Zoom room open for people to just pop in and say Christ is risen to each other.
Nice idea, yeah.
To see each other's faces, because it's important. My mom lives alone, and she's not great on FaceTime or Zoom. She's not sure how to use everything. And in particular, she doesn't want to because she doesn't have her makeup on, and then she would have to put on makeup, and it's a lot of effort. And but I'm making her FaceTime with me every couple of days because I think it's really important to see faces. And I think that's a great point. When we are feasting on Palm Sunday and especially on Pascha, we need to feast together. And we need to see each other to feast together. And however you do that, if you know how to set up a Zoom call, do it. Probably one person in your group knows how. If not, a lot of phones have video conferencing, FaceTime, all this stuff. Do as much of that as you can. Don't underestimate how important it is. That's a good suggestion.
Mhm.
That's self-care and feasting.
Yes. Is there anyone else that has a question before we go? I'm checking, I'm looking, no one's waving at me. All right, Elissa, we just thank you so much for this time together. I'm very prayerful that we'll be able to really focus on the right voices, to be able to discern what voices really are we hearing from right now, and to be able to turn away from some and focus on others, and to take really good care of our souls during this time and going forward. I do want to remind everyone, we did get this recorded. Eventually, this is hopefully soon. My husband happens to be able to connect things onto our St. Philip in Souderton, Pennsylvania, St. Philip Orthodox Church Facebook page. I'm not sure if you'll have it on our website, but one or the other, we'll have it there. If you want to make note, also, Elissa did post the link to the story that she referred to about Pascha and Dachau. And we'll make sure that we get that link posted as well. On the website or on Facebook, hon? YouTube. YouTube, our St. Philip Orthodox Church YouTube page. So I just want to thank each and every one of you for your time. Oh, Rula has her hand up. Hang on, Rula. Okay, go ahead.
Yes. Hi, Alice. Thank you, Elissa, for the talk. Really, I love it. I agree with you every sentence you said. And the same thing I just told my kids. Let's create a Zoom page for us to connect with my family on Palm Sunday and on Easter, because like I've been married with the family 26 years. We never miss a Easter with my sister-in-law and her kids. We never. Will be the first time. She's in Pittsburgh. We are here in Virginia, and we're gonna do a Zoom Palm Sunday and the Holy Sepulchre. Really, it's not just us, all of us. There will be the same thing. It's depressing, and but God is great. We're happy as long as we're healthy. Everybody is healthy. Thank God for everything.
Thank God.
Thank you, Elissa.
Thank God. And I think that that's exactly the way to do it, is to just be as virtual fellowship as much as possible, because it's so important for us. And that's a big part of what the celebration is, right? And that's the thing, like in fact, if you think about it, when you say, like, think of the things about Holy Week and Pascha that you will miss the most, it's really, the people you're going to miss are going to be, a big part of it. I want to, since we have a second and there weren't a lot of questions, I have a quote for you that I really love. It's from Callistos Ware. He said, and it's about repentance, but just listen to it because it's really cool. He says, "To repent is to look not downward at my own shortcomings, but upward at God's love, not backward with self-reproach, but forward with trustfulness. It is to see not what I have failed to be, but what by the grace of Christ I can yet become." I think it's so beautiful. And I think, in this time that is so difficult, to think about this idea that we're never called to focus on everything that we've done wrong or everything that's going wrong or all of the problems. We're really focused to look at Christ and to think about what he can help us become. And so, we look at our circumstances now and we say, all right, I'm missing out on some things, but what can I do? What can I do? Like, what do I have? What are my resources? How can I help other people? Like, some people are, sewing masks and sending them out, and whatever it is, there are, Mary made soup for her neighbor and had her neighbor leave the pot outside. That's so brilliant. Had her leave her pot and just went and put the soup in the pot, right? It's no contact, but she was able to do it. It's beautiful. What are you going to say, Mary? I can't hear.
I have a lot of immune compromise, so I really can't take a chance to contact somebody who has that. So that's what we figured out. Also, if I knew that we were going to be recorded, I would have had a better hairdo.
Part of the coronavirus fun is having crazy hairdos, because nobody's going to be able to get their hair cut. My daughter actually cut my hair the other day.
Very
so
nice.
It looks okay on Zoom. If you see it in person, it's a little.
Well, and you can't see me from the waist down, Mary. So I think we're comfortable, right? That's the important thing, is we're comfortable and we're together. We're together.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, everyone. I look forward to seeing your lovely face again here and there on the interwebs, Elissa. And thank you, each one. Have a wonderful, blessed Pascha, Holy Weekend Pascha. Bye-bye.
Bye.